Hello, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a minute to get settled, and then we will get started. All right, I know we're short on time, kind of getting all our information in. So as you guys are joining, just a few reminders, this is not for CPE credit. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box located on your menu bar, or you can use the chat feature. All right, Art, if you want to go ahead, this is all yours.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our joint weekly webinar put on by Eide Bailly CPAs and HMWC CPAs and Business Advisors. My name is Art Wiederman. I'm a dental-specific CPA. I've been practicing in Southern California for about 35 years. And with me is my partner in crime, Scott Haberman, who's a senior tax manager at Eide Bailly, who also, his practice is primarily working with dentists. Good morning, Scott. How you doing?
Good, Art. I'm good. Just catching up on some reading.
Yeah. And then we have some special guests. We have Dan Bywater, who's the vice president of Ready Capital, who's been our SBA loan specialist all along this, and Dan has been an amazing resource for all of us. Good morning, Dan.
Morning, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And then Megan Mortimer, who is the congressional lobbyist for the American Dental Association. And Megan, without you, I don't know, and Mike Graham, I don't know where we would be. Megan has been the one updating us, direct contact with Congress and the SBA. And I guess, Megan, we just got a new document 25 minutes ago?
Yes, the Treasury, Department of Treasury put out an interim rule to update their former interim rule on the PPP loan program. So you and I and Dan and Scott have all been reading it in the last 25 minutes to try to translate it.
Yeah, so we'll give you what we have initially read, and when we do our update on our next meeting, we'll go into. So let's get right into the data. We're gonna talk about policy and political update and see where we are, where Megan and her contacts are with the government and the SBA. There have been major updates and information on the EIDL loan program, the PPP loan program, a little bit on payroll tax deferral, and then what your options and choices are. So we're going to try and get through this in an hour. Okay, let's go to our next slide. So status for additional funding for loan programs. So Megan, my understanding is that the $349 billion that's in the queue for the PPP program is basically, from what I've read, they're maybe halfway through that being committed. Do you have any idea?
We were told that funds would run out April 17th, if not before that. So Friday.
So there you go. So if you have not applied for this program, and this is a program you're choosing to apply for, today is a good day, Megan, I think.
Today would be a good day to do it. So in terms of the additional funding, so as we know, we saw a proposal go forward from Secretary Mnuchin for $250 billion additional dollars for the PPP loan program. Everyone agrees there needs to be more money for the PPP program, and the Republicans would like to move forward with just a straight up infusion of $250 billion into the PPP program. The Democrats, however, want to see an infusion of cash into PPP, but they also want to see an additional $15 billion to the EIDL grant program, an additional $30 billion to the EIDL loan program. So they are also asking for additional kind of SNAP benefits, a couple of things for tribal communities. But the big debate right now is Republicans want a clean $250 billion for PPP and Democrats want more. So they've tried to hold two votes, as I told you, the unanimous consent votes where they don't actually physically have to be there, but they all have to agree. There'd be no opposition, which hardly ever happens. And it already failed this week. The Senate is expected to do this again on Thursday. That is also expected to fail. So there's a real push to try to get negotiations to at least satisfy or dissatisfy people enough for them to come to a central ground. As long as everyone's unhappy at least a little bit, that's usually when we can get to a place where, they can go forward with something. Those are the competing proposals from the party perspective. And they're now doing a lot more political pushback where McConnell is calling Democrats obstructionists, and the Democrats are calling Republicans, somewhat like cheap, as if we could do more. And if we don't do more right now for EIDL and other programs, those are also going to go away for people. So hopefully there's enough pressure being put on them so that they can work something out sooner rather than later. And then,
so if the money's going to run out by the 17th, which is basically Friday,
mhm.
the likelihood that we're going to have additional funding by the 17th is not very good, right?
It's not. I mean, I'm always hopeful, especially right now, since they've been moving at lightning speed, that they can figure it out. But it might be an 11th hour vote on Friday.
Okay.
So,
so
again, it's not a vote where they're all there. It's a unanimous consent where they all have to just kind of agree in absentia.
Well, let's hope. And then as far as the money running out, maybe Dan, you can also chime in on this. As far as the money actually running out, if somebody has submitted and this is a big question, if someone has submitted their application to a bank or to Dan, and they're in the queue and it's being in the approval process, with this money running out by Friday, I mean, does that mean that everybody who has applied is going to get in, or does that mean that everybody who has applied may get in, may not? Do you have any feel for that?
Unfortunately, just applying doesn't necessarily save that money for you. The stage where it's saved is when the actual SBA loan number is issued. So like you were saying, Art, today's the day. Like if you're going to apply, you've got to do it today because there's no guarantee that this program will continue. I've got, we've got 6,000, almost 7,000 applications have come in. Not all of them have SBA numbers. We're working night and day, burning the midnight oil, trying to get loan numbers for everybody. But there's a good chunk of them that don't have them yet. So we're working hard to do that. And I know other banks are doing the same. So just because you got submitted doesn't mean you'll have the money set aside.
So to be approved, Dan, they get a special number from the SBA. Does that received by the lender through an email? Is it received directly by the customer? What are the mechanics of knowing if you have been approved?
You should get an email, and again, every bank's different. You should get an email stating that that the loan's been approved, or that the SBA application or the SBA loan number has been issued. There should be something like that. If you don't get an indication like that, you can always reach out to the bank and try to look up your application, see where it's at. We have a pretty slick system here where if you contact me, I can look up your application and let you know right there on the phone whether we have the number or not. In fact, I'm looking at one right now that we don't have a number on. It was just issued this morning. The application was issued this morning. So hopefully we'll get that soon. But
if they have an approval number, that means they are going to get part of that $349 billion.
Yeah, so it's like a place mark, basically grabs that money and holds it.
Okay. All right, great. Let's move on to our next, and we'll definitely come back, Megan, to the PPP loans, and we got some guidance which is not on our slides, obviously. I mean, so anyway, so there's major updates on the EIDL loan program. So we're limited. Now, again, we're in the wild, wild west, or if you're in the east, the wild, wild east. I have gotten reports from our members of the Academy of Dental CPAs. One of our members said they got a loan that was funded for $500,000 in the EIDL program that was submitted early. Another one of our members said something about a $200,000 loan. The SBA posted on their Massachusetts website that EIDL grants were going to be limited to $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000. And that is the letter. I got one myself. I have a second business. I got that email last night about 8 o'clock that they are limiting them. And many of you have, if you have not, should be starting to receive this EIDL grant money. It should be up, it's $1,000 per employee. So if you have more than 10 employees, you'll get the maximum of 10,000. If you have 2 employees, you'll get 2,000. But that is pretty well what they're doing. In addition, what they're doing is they're offering an additional, and Amy, can we put up the letter that I sent you, the email I sent you last night from the SBA?
Yes.
For a second, let me see.
There's this one.
Yeah. So this is what I got. I got this on my personal email last night for a business that I have. And basically, if you look at the bold print at the top, it says to ensure the greatest number of applicants can receive assistance, the advance is going to provide $1,000 per employee up to a maximum of $10,000. And we are hearing, and Scott, I don't know if you've gotten any emails, but a lot of our clients are starting to get this money. Megan, you're nodding your head. This money is starting to go out.
A lot of our members received the money this morning in their bank accounts. And I do have one thing to say on the EIDL loan amounts whenever you.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please.
So people who applied early, we are seeing, 200,000, 500,000, but we were receiving updates that now, because there's so much competition for these loans, SBA is looking at capping the output at $35,000.
Yeah, I mean, the other letter, Amy, if you could put up the other letter that we got about a week ago. I think this is the other one that I sent. No, not that one. No, then I guess we don't have it. But we'll get to this one in a second. But let's go back to the PowerPoint because we'll get to the ADA letter here in a second. Yeah, the letter that we got said 15,000 in working capital plus the 10. You're now hearing 35,000. I mean, aren't these loans, the EIDL program, appropriated? I mean, they're appropriated. It's not like you can just, spend whatever you want in the program, right?
Right, and since this program was already in existence, they didn't do additional appropriation under CARES. It was what was already there because people would use these loans previously for, disasters because of weather or other kinds of disasters in their areas. So this was already an existing program, but the money is going to run out. It's not just an endless pot of money. And so, in the beginning, for people who applied really early, they were approved for these larger dollar amounts. But once everybody started getting wind, everyone started running to the EIDL loan. Some people determined they'd rather have an EIDL loan than a PPP loan. And so now we're seeing things like a range between 15,000 to 35,000 because SBA can make that determination on their own.
And I doubt, go ahead. I'm sorry. I doubt that they're going to approve more funding for the EIDL because right now the whole discussion in Congress is the PPP. That's the big ticket item. So the likelihood that they're going to approve more money anytime soon for EIDL, probably not good, Megan?
I mean, that's what the Democrats want is more money for EIDL and PPP.
They do.
So
okay.
I wouldn't say there's a zero chance. I would say it's less likely than the PPP loan infusion. But if the Democrats get a little bit of what they want, maybe they give up the additional SNAP benefits and they get some more money for the EIDL loan programs, perhaps.
So do we have any idea of, I mean, if this money runs out on Friday, what percentage of people who have applied or who want this money are going to be out? I mean, are 50% of the people, is there any kind of numbers as far as how much left or not really?
I haven't seen, I mean, in terms of what's left, yeah, again, I saw about like half of it at least was allocated Monday. But again, different dollar amounts for different people. So I can't give you a percentage of how many people actually receive, loans because some are going to ask for a lot more than others.
I guess what I meant is 250 billion going to be enough to cover everybody who applies for this program on top of the 349?
I mean, I would say I doubt that, honestly, especially since people are going to keep maybe the people who've already applied, perhaps, who, would get bumped out of the queue, but still, I don't know. 250 billion doesn't seem like a whole lot right now, even though that sounds crazy to say.
Well, considering that we went through, today is April the 14th, so in basically 9 business days, we went through almost half, if not more than half, and then this money is going to go shortly now. A lot of people have already applied. We'll see. All right, let's move to the next slide. Oh, this is the one. That's right. So, Megan, this is what one of our clients got, one of Pam Chamberlain's clients got about right at the beginning, about a week to 10 days ago. And this is basically saying that under the EIDL program, they're going to basically give you the grant money. Now, when this came out, this was before they limited to $1,000 per person, but they also said that we're going to make available to you for now up to $15,000 in working capital, which I believe the letter says is going to cover 2 months working capital. I don't know for what business $7,500 is enough to cover working capital, but that's what they sent us. So this letter was received by many of our clients, and this was for the EIDL because it says 30 years, 3.75%, 12-month payments after closing. So So, you said 20, you said 35,000 total. This says 25,000 total. It's going to be something, and hopefully they'll appropriate. What did you say, Megan? How much more do they want to appropriate for idle?
Well, they're going back and forth, but the Dems want an additional 30 billion.
All right. Well, that's may not go that far, but anything that we can get would be great. All right. So that's kind of where we're at on the idle loans. I think we hit all the high points on that, guys. I think we're good on that. So now the PPP loan update. So, okay. So basically, as we reported last week, the government, under frequently asked question number 20 from the SBA, has indicated that the bank is required, once approval is received, to distribute the funds basically within 10 calendar days from the date approval is received. Do I have that right? Okay. So basically, it begins, the 8th, and it also said that the 8-week period begins on the date the lender makes the first disbursement from the PPP loan. Now, Dan, let me ask you this. It says 10 days. I've talked to lots of banks. They're trying to get that money in and get it out as quickly as possible. I don't think they're going to be waiting 10 days. Do you?
I think it depends on the bank. But yeah, I think they don't they're trying to clear these out as quick as possible. But I can see some banks, because of their processes maybe being longer than 10 days. There's a lot of things that a lot of banks are trying to figure out already. We've approved 220 million so far in PPP loans, and we're just starting to fund some. There's just a lot of things that the banks have to do to prep these before they can be funded.
So Dan, what's been the lag time between the date you get the SBA approval and the date that money is starting to flow? Is it a week? Is it 10 days? I mean, is it 6 days?
Because of our automated process, a lot of the loans that get applied for on our portal have gotten SBA loan numbers within about 24 hours, 48 hours. The waiting point is from that moment through the processing to the actual funding. And so we're just, even though we've done 220 million of approvals, we're just barely starting to fund these. So that's been happening over the last 24 hours. And that of course, that wave will increase obviously over the next couple of days.
Scott, have any of your clients gotten PPP money yet?
The loan applications have been approved and they've been given the loan number, but they haven't received the funding yet. And they received approval last week. I think most of them are trying to wait on receiving the funding as long as possible, obviously.
Yeah, so that's the whole intent of why Treasury put out this 10-day, because a lot of banks are saying, hey, we'll just delay giving you the money so that you can wait until you're even closer to when you might be ready to open your practice. So they wanted to do this for 2 reasons. One, they didn't want banks to sit on this and not distribute money to people who wanted it as quickly as possible. But also they didn't want banks advertising saying, hey, apply, approve, and then we'll hold on to it until you're ready to start your 8-week period. That was a large part of the reason why they put this out there.
But the problem that we have in the dental profession, Megan, and then I'm going to go to the letter, is that dental offices in the United States, for the most, well, I would say virtually all dental offices are shut down except for emergency procedures. And that what's going to end up happening is that if this, I mean, based on this rule and the approvals, we have a double-edged sword. If we apply and we get, and Dan, you get an approval, you're required to disperse this money within 10 days. So it's conceivable that people who have applied for this money are going to get this money before the end of April. And the fact is the dental offices are not going to be open before the end of April, and they may not be open during most, if not all, of this 8-week period, right, Megan? That's the issue. So Amy, could you put the letter up from from the American Dental Association? So this was a letter that was sent. Megan, did this go out? Was this sent to members also, or is it just up on the website, or
No, we send it, we do a couple of things. We put it up on the website, we write news stories about it, but then we have specific contacts and staffers and members, congressional members themselves on the Hill, that we send it out to in advance of it getting posted so they know it's coming. And then it gets circulated among the various offices through those staff members.
So can you kind of summarize what this, I'm not going to read the letter. Could you summarize what the letter says?
So the initial is asking for them to get their act together and fund these programs more. We're asking for not only PPP, but for EIDL grant and additional money for EIDL loans too. But the thing in here that we added and talked about last week is providing flexibility for people who receive the PPP loans to kind of determine their 8-week period up until December 31. So instead of having to rehire everybody back by June 30th, you would have until December 31 to rehire everybody back. And you would have between the time you receive your loan and any of the 8-week period that you choose up until December 31st to seek loan forgiveness.
Okay, so let me ask you, you are as close to Congress as I'm ever going to get. What do you think the likelihood is, and if you had a crystal ball, that the dental profession is going to get some help here?
Well, it would be for all small businesses, but we're actually asking for medical providers, all small business medical providers and dental providers. So it wouldn't just be dentists, because we want to like focus this kind of for the healthcare provider workforce that is everyone's being hurt if they have a small medical practice. I don't think the likelihood for December is high. We usually ask for what we think would be the end all be all of what we think we could possibly get on the upper echelon. There may be discussions of an extension. A couple of problems that we foresee are for people who have already received their PPP loans and have decided to follow the rules, and then the rules change and other people are allowed to delay. That might cause some people to be a little upset, so they'd have to retroactively apply this. So if you received it, maybe you could mess with it a little bit more in terms of the equation for when you're closer to open your practice. But I don't want anyone to rely on that. Also, if the money runs out, if small businesses start applying, the money runs out. So it doesn't matter if you decide to wait to apply. So again, the flexibility is there if they implement it, but we're hearing from everyone that the intent of this is to get people off of unemployment by June 30th. That was the whole intent of the law. And they understand the small business concerns, but really that was the whole crux of it. So I don't know. I always like to be optimistic. We might get some wiggle room, but I wouldn't want anyone to rely on that.
Yeah, and again, it would be all small businesses, and Congress is going to look at this and say, okay, so we keep everybody at $600 a week on unemployment, and the game would be, if you will, then on July 31, if we give you guys what you want, then you come off of unemployment, and then we start the 8-week period. And I don't know if Congress is really feeling the love for that, Megan.
Yeah, it just means more money out of the federal government's coffers, although they're going to do the loan forgiveness as well. So, you can talk about the math either way. I think for them, they really do want to get more people off unemployment too, because a lot of people are just enjoying larger checks than they do actually receive when they're employed. And they don't want people to start getting used to that. They want them to get rehired. They want to reduce that $600 extra. So yeah, again, the intent was clear. We're just seeing a lot more pushback as we see how bad the virus is and could peak, a little bit later in some areas, earlier in others. It's just because it's all over the board. We just have no idea when practices can open.
That's right. And then, the whole, not even getting into this subject of
PPE.
When practices open, they have to get all the safety gear in order to be able to practice. And I saw the story on 60 Minutes this Sunday night where people in healthcare workers in New York are using garbage bags as protective gear. And if the healthcare workers on the front line get it, how are the dentists going to get the protective gear that they need?
And dentists are much more susceptible because of practicing in people's mouths and, the salivary kind of output from that. They're much more susceptible to being exposed to the virus than a lot of other providers. So we're lobbying very hard from just the dental practice perspective on safety and tax incentives for that, or any help the federal government can provide, and also asking for each office to be able to have the rapid testing kits.
Yeah, and you also referenced in the letter, which if you click on the letter, it goes to the CDC's guidelines for dentistry.
Yeah.
And they're very clear and very specific and very, which they should be onerous because it's, you know, it's an issue of contracting this horrible virus. So, okay, so let's, because I want to be respectful and make sure we get everything in. Scott, let's touch quickly on the payroll tax deferral, and then I want to go back to talk really about what everybody's options are. So go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so the IRS came out with some guidance on April 10th, so late last week. There was some uncertainty about the payroll tax deferral and can you do this if you're participating in the PPP loan? Well, yes, the good news is you can defer the employer portion of Social Security taxes, so that 6.2% that you're on the hook for any wages that you're paying right now. But as soon as you get notice from your lender about forgiveness of your loan after the 8 weeks are up, you have to stop deferring those payroll taxes and pay up. But the good news is you don't have to pay all of it at that time. You can wait until those applicable dates that were mentioned of December 31st, 2021 for 50% of it, and December 31st, 2022 for the other 50%. So you can defer your payroll taxes. How much is that right now for a couple of months of payroll and not much is run through your payroll system? Probably not a big price tag that you can benefit from, but something that's an option out there to talk about with your CPA and your payroll company.
Yeah, and obviously, since this is a webinar for Eide Bailly and HMWC clients, please, folks, lean on us, call us. We're here to help you with every single decision that you need to make. I mean, Scott and his team, my team, Don Watson, Pam Chamberlain, Sam William in our office, who have just been living this for a month now and taking hundreds and hundreds of emails and calls. And absolutely, if you have questions, let us know. Okay, so let's get into what are your options and choices, and then let's go through that, and then we'll hit the update here at the end. So here are your choices, folks. Basically, the SBA has forced our hand at the moment. You saw the letter that Megan and the folks at the ADA, and I want to say again before I go forward that Megan and Michael and everybody at the ADA are fighting as hard as they possibly can. Megan, I do see some gray hairs coming up from you from the last month. No, I'm just kidding. You've been working very, very hard. I know that. I know you've been doing everything that you guys possibly can. Your National Dental Society folks are fighting for you every single possible way they can. And remember, they're fighting for you, not only for you, but they're fighting against the airline industry who's fighting, and the Teamsters who are fighting, and all the other industries that have millions and millions of employees. So it's a numbers game. So thank you again, Megan, to you and Michael and the president and executive director and all the people at ADA for all that you're trying to do to help the dentists through this very, very challenging time. I just want to make that clear. So let's go back to the PPP money. So Dan sends you an email and says you've been approved on the 20th. He's going to disperse this money. You could have money before the end of this month. So your office is closed. What do you do? So basically the rules, because obviously what you want to do is you want the forgiveness of this debt down the road, which doesn't come until the 8-week period is over. So Dr. Wiederman gets $100,000 for his PPP loan. My monthly payroll costs are $40,000 a month. My monthly rent is $5,000 and my utilities are $1,000. Because remember that we applied for payroll costs based on 2.5 times the payroll, but we're only paying it for 2 months. So that's why your loan app might be a little more. So this example. So I choose to accept the money at $100,000. Dan sends me a check for $100,000. Thank you, Dan, on April 20th. So let's go to the next slide. So the regulations state that we need to spend at least 75% of the funds for payroll costs. So here's my thinking, and again, team, join in on your thoughts here. We don't have the guidance. The guidance is supposed to be April 27th. Megan, has SBA given you any indication? Are they going to wait till the 27th? Are we going to have any? We got a little interim guidance today, but we got it's a tiny bit of it. Any feel?
I don't think that they can wait till the 27th. There's just way too many lenders asking way too many questions, and there's just, it would be really irresponsible for them to wait until the 11th hour to do that.
Well, we'll see what happens. So we have to use 75% of the funds for payroll costs. So my thinking is, if my rent is $10,000 for 8 weeks and my utilities are $2,000, we get the money today. You can pay your rent and your utilities for month one. That's $6,000. I'm still well within the 75%. I'm taking strategy here, folks. These are things that you have to be thinking about. And you still have the 75,000. And by the way, you can choose if you say, I'm going to pay all this money to my employees. I'm not going to worry about my rent. I want my employees to have all this money. You have to do a spreadsheet and figure out how you're going to spend this money. But most people are probably going to look at 75%. So you have $75,000. We don't have the guidance to say, can we hold this money for 7.5 weeks and then pay out a bonus at the end and say, well, this is your payroll for the next 2 months? I don't think the government's going to let us do that. But we don't have any rules. We have no rules. We have no idea how this is going to work. So we are in the ultimate conundrum. So my thought is, you get the money, you put it in a segregated account, you hang on to it, maybe you pay your rent, and maybe your first payroll is May 1st, and you hang on to this money until we get the rules of the road. Okay, that's what I'm thinking. If you want to immediately put your employees back on the payroll, and another thing, by the way, a reason to wait to start paying payroll is what Megan said earlier, which is what if they do give small businesses some flexibility, right, Megan? If we start paying the payroll out today, and then a week from now they say, oh, well, don't worry about it. You can wait till your dental office opens. So that's another reason to just kind of wait till we get some guidance. So, but if you wanted to immediately put your employees back on payroll, if your costs were $40,000 a month, and yours included is $83.33 a month, you could plan on your first payroll May 1st. And hopefully by then we should have guidance on the mechanics of the do's and don'ts of the process. I mean, there's nothing in the CARES Act or any of this legislation that says you must pay this 8-week payroll out 1 week at a time or 2 weeks at a time or 3. It doesn't say anything, right? Not a thing. So at this moment, like I say, there's nothing that talks about that. And here's another thing, folks, that I want you to be thinking about. I think we talked about this last week, is what we're thinking about is, let's say that you are stuck with this rule. And I have had conversations with about a dozen dentists in the past 2 or 3 days. And I've unfortunately had to use the words, please don't shoot the messenger, which is me. And I'm sure Dan and Scott and Megan, you've had these same conversations about, well, this is not fair and our dental office is not open and we're paying people who are going to be sitting at home. Well, let's say you do pay people to sit at home. This gives you, number one, again, an opportunity to generate some really great goodwill with your team. You're going to say to your team, listen, I know you're home. Maybe you're getting some unemployment benefits. Maybe you're not, but I'm putting you back on payroll and you can pay your bills. And I'll tell you what, if you phrase that right to your team and they understand that you care about them, that's going to go a long way for you and your team when we come out of this thing. The other thing is it gives you an opportunity to engage in training. Now, obviously, you can't go to CE courses, but there are tons of wonderful CE courses that are being given on the internet. You can do training on Zoom. I actually personally learned how to use Zoom myself. I've had 30, 40 people on Zoom meetings for specialists. And if I can learn how to use Zoom, anybody can learn how to use Zoom. That's a fact. So there's this opportunity. So the fact is, are you going to be disappointed that when you come out of this, you might have used up all of your EID, all of your PPP money on payroll, and you're not going to have any money when you open your office? That's true. But again, we have to remember the intention of the law, which is to put people back to work, right, Megan? I mean, that's what they want to do. And the intention of the law was not necessarily to say, here's some money that you don't have to pay back, but we don't have to pay it until you open your dental office. That was not it. And again, please don't shoot the messenger here, but I'm just telling you what the government is thinking. And if this is the rules of the game, then we have to play by the rules of the game. If you want the forgiveness, Now, remember, folks, if you don't want the forgiveness and you just choose to use this money for other business expenses, I mean, you can pay the money back. Whatever is not forgiven, remember that you have to pay back in 2 years, even though it's only at 1%, it's 2 years. So if you have to pay back $100,000 or $200,000 over 2 years, when we get back, you know, to real life, that's something you have to consider. Let's go to the next slide. So again, you know, advantage if you can wait. You can say, I'm going to wait. I trust the government. I'm going to wait, and I'm not going to apply. I'm going to wait a week or two, a month to wait till the dental office opens. From what Megan is telling us and what we're hearing, that would be a dangerous decision if you truly believe there's going to be money there. Megan, you're saying that this money is going to run out by the 17th, and there is no, at this moment, there is no guarantee. I have also heard rumblings that there might be some strings attached to the second, and there might be some conditions attached to the second, and I don't know. We don't know what Congress is going to do. So if you want this money, whether you're going to get it when your dental office opens or not, I would apply now. If you have not applied, I would get this done sooner rather than later. You know, you may be able to use some of it when you're open, but the big risk, like it says on the slide, when the money runs out and there's no round two, or if the round two says there are restrictions, you know, what if it says we're only going to give it to, you know, businesses with over 50 employees because we want more people to get back to work. We don't know what they're going to do, but who knows? If you wait, you're taking a risk. Does everybody agree with that? Yeah, you're taking a risk. So, you know, let's go to the next slide, please. Your other choice is not to take the PPP loan money at all. Again, if you applied early and you get idle money, maybe you don't take the PPP money. Maybe you get a nice idle loan because you applied early and you're approved for 100,000 or 200,000, or this one client's case, 500,000. And you use that money and you don't get forgiveness, but you've got 30 years to pay it back. Your payment's going to be low. That would be a great way to get out of this. It would give you you could use the employee, Scott, they can use the employee retention credit, right?
Yeah, definitely. $5,000 per employee.
But what you and I have talked about, what everybody seems to talk about, is that the PPP, from a purely financial standpoint, is a much better deal than the employee retention credit because it's 100% forgiveness. So, folks, at this moment, these are, as far as I see it and as far as our panel sees it, these are your choices as to what to do. We had all hoped that you would be able to, you know, have Dan say, you know, call Dan and say, Dan, you know, the state of Utah or the state of Nevada or the state of California has allowed us to open our dental offices back on June 15th. That's when we'd like to fund the loan. Many banks will allow a latitude of a month or 2 or 3 in the traditional loan process, but that has been taken away as of April the 8th. So therefore, you know, it is what it is. And if you want to use this money, you're going to have to use it in the 8-week period. We are hopefully, we're going to be doing this update again next week. And hopefully by then we have more guidance. So let's no, we're not to questions yet. We have one more piece of information. No, it doesn't matter which slide is up, Amy, that's fine. But 35, about an hour ago, Megan, we got a little love letter from the Treasury, right?
Yes, their new interim rule on
So
PPP.
we have a new interim rule. So I'm going to paraphrase a couple of these things, and and again, understand, folks, when we talk about that this is going at ludicrous speed, this is what we're talking about. Literally, Megan sent an email to our panel at about 30 minutes before we went on live with this webinar. So I literally stopped what I was doing. Megan stopped what she was doing. I suspect Scott and Dan maybe did. And I started reading this guidance. So preliminarily, this is the first impression that we get. Number one, if you are a partnership, this particular interim guidance dealt only primarily with partnerships and sole proprietorships. So that's what we're talking about here, partnerships, sole proprietorships. So what it said was that a partnership can add, if you have partners that make more than $100,000, the partners would add $100,000 per partner to the payroll costs submitted for the partnership application, and not submit their own partnership submit their own individual applications. Did I say that right, Megan? I think that's what we talked about. So let's say that you have a partnership and your wages, your payroll costs for your employees are $500,000, and there's 2 partners. You would then submit a request for $700,000, $100,000 for each partner. I will tell you, Dan, I know that I've run into banks. I just got an email from one of my podcast listeners that said my bank won't let me put in the $100,000. Well, I'm going to send them this guidance. But I know some of the banks have been resistant in that regard. So if you are a partnership, then you have to put, you get to add $100,000 per partner, assuming you make that. And by the way, if you make less than $100,000 as a partner in a dental partnership, you can't put 100. You can put whatever you make. It's the lesser of the 2. So that's the one guidance they gave us. The other guidance that they gave us is very interesting, and it has to do with sole proprietorships. So number 1, for sole proprietorships, which we're allowed to start applying for this on Friday, number 1, you basically use line 31 of Schedule C to calculate the $100,000, the amount of your net income. So for a sole proprietorship, you're going to do your payroll costs, which is off of your 941s they're talking about. They use line 5, column 1, plus all the pre-tax. I think the line 1 of the 940 is the best to use because that's got all the pre-tax benefits. The Schedule C, basically you would use line 31, which is your net income from your Schedule C. But what the guidance says that's very important is that you're allowed to use the employee benefits. In other words, the employee portion of the retirement plan contribution, which is line 19 of the Schedule C, and the portion in your insurance expense, which is line 14 of the Schedule C, but they are not allowing you to use for the application nor for the forgiveness, if I read this right, the employer contribution to retirement plan or health insurance. Did I get that right, guys? That's what I read in the quick reading we did before this meeting. So they're not giving us that, they're not giving the sole proprietors, and I suspect they didn't mention partnerships specifically for this, but they're not giving the partnerships the opportunity to take their deductions for their retirement plan contributions. And that's what it doesn't say that the partnerships can't take it, but it is saying that the sole proprietors do not get, at least for the forgiveness. Megan, we were reading before we went on the air here that it said not including the owners, right?
Right.
So that's what now, obviously, we have to read and reread this and digest what they gave us. Again, we literally got it at, we went on at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We got this at 10:30 Pacific time. So I got one reading of it. So it also seemed to say that the banks, Dan, are going to want Schedule C for 2019, even if your 2019 return isn't done. That's scary for us.
Yeah, that's what it reads. I can't imagine they would stick to that, though. I imagine a 2019 financial statement would suffice in that case. But yeah, it reads that way.
Well, and then the other thing that we got for back to the partnerships is that if you have a partnership of professional corporations, we've told clients that they need to file their $100,000 on the partnership, on the corporate part, on 2 separate applications. So if you have a partnership of 2 professional corporations, we've been telling people file one for the partnership with the employees and one for your corporations with the owner partners who are corporations. So there's no guidance in this particular document about that situation, but I do think that that's what we've got to see. These are all the questions that we have. So, so the health insurance, the retirement, again, and the big takeaway from this document is that the Schedule C people and probably the partnership people, the owners, are not going to get to add their personal retirement benefits or their personal health insurance benefits into the calculation of how much is borrowed and how much is forgiven. And we know that there are people that have already filed applications and maybe been approved and gotten money where those amounts are included. And does this apply to an S corp? So again, these are the so many questions that we have on this. So did I state that clearly? Anybody have any comments on this? Do we all just want to go to an island and hide somewhere? Crazy. So, okay, so we have some questions that I can pull up here. Let's see how much we have about 14 minutes left on the seminar. Megan, Scott, Dan, anything you want to bring up if we go before we go to some of our questions that we have?
I just got a notice that the Republicans are now saying the money's going to run out Thursday.
Oh, thank you for sharing. You're such a joy to talk to, Megan. Thursday.
Sorry. Yes.
No, Thursday. Wow. Okay. Well, then we're going to have to do what we can do here. Okay. Number one, if we can't spend 75% for payroll costs, but we spend 65%, is the forgiveness prorated? Scott, I read this statute. I have this exact question from a client, and the answer, according to what the CARES Act said, is yes. It is prorated. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. The same with the number of employees. You don't need the full, say you had 50 employees before a pandemic. You don't need to have all 50 to get partial forgiveness. If you have 40 out of the 50 back, then that will work for partial forgiveness too.
But then I guess the question is you've got two requirements for forgiveness. You've got 75% of employees of payroll costs, and you've got the number of employees. So how are they going to meld the two of those together in figuring out the forgiveness? In other words, what if you spend 65% of the money on payroll costs, but you have 80% of your employees back? We don't know the answers to those questions. We're hoping the guidance is going to come in those questions. But yes, what does let's see, if my lender, large bank, is dragging their feet on processing my PPP loan, can I apply with another small lender? Megan, this was a question I had. I thought I read in the statute that you're only allowed to apply with one lender. Is that your understanding, or am I incorrect?
I didn't read that in the statute, but I'd have to go back. We've been telling folks who, like, say, for instance, the ones that applied for Wells Fargo and got that rejection or the notice to them saying, hey, if you don't want to wait for us to try to process this, please feel free to apply with another lender. So some of the banks are telling you to apply with another lender. So I was under the impression that you could apply for more than one, but I'll look in the statute again.
We've gotten a lot of people that have called us and said, hey, I applied with you early on, but my other bank has gotten approved, but they said that you guys had already pulled an SBA number, and so we've had to go in there and cancel the SBA number so they can go with the other bank they applied with. So I don't think there's anything against applying with two banks, but there might be some mix-ups there when maybe, like, for instance, like where we've applied for an SBA number, have gotten it, and it's just waiting to be processed, and this other bank is trying to pull the number, but it's saying it's already been pulled. So that's only mix-up that would happen there. But I don't think it hurts them. I think really it's a smart move. Now, this late in the game with the money running out, I don't know if they'll have time to play that type of card.
Yeah. And next question, that's what this is. Can we apply through a second bank? We've already started through one bank. Heard B of A is applying forgiveness, like 90% employee. Okay, so yeah, this came up too, that 90% employee retention. No. One of the things you have to do, folks, is read your promissory notes. Many of these banks had to put provisions into their promissory notes and their applications at the beginning of the process to get their systems going. My understanding is that the banks are going to follow what the CARES Act says. They're not going to put their own requirements in. So if there are requirements in your promissory note from any bank that says, you have to do this and it's not in the act, then you need to ask your bank. Most of the banks have, if they have promissory notes that are not exactly what the law says, they are fixing them. I've talked to a couple of them, but they've said they've had to put this information in to get their program out there. Again, we've gotten, this is going to be considered, in my opinion, the one of the biggest banking debacles in the history of the banking industry, and it's not the bank's fault. Okay, the banks are just doing what the government has basically put on us, and it's not Megan's fault, I promise. Well, Megan doesn't work for the government; she works for the ADA. There you go. Okay, so let's go. Are you scroll down to the? Let me scroll down here for some more questions. I've heard the PPP loan should be treated as unemployment via the employer to keep employees on payroll. So doesn't waiting, I've heard that the PPP loan should be treated as unemployment via the employer. No. The PPP loan and unemployment are separate. They are separate. So your people are filing for unemployment, are getting unemployment, and once you get this money and you put them back on payroll, it will take them off of
Art, you frozen a bit. Just letting you know.
So I think Megan's second in charge, right?
Is that how you guys?
Scott, do
So
you
I
want to
can move
jump
on. Is there any concern that if you have a PPP loan and an EIDL loan that this may affect the forgiveness of the PPP? Or in other words, I have a PPP commitment. Should I apply for EIDL through my office building at LLC? Having an EIDL loan isn't going to affect your PPP loan forgiveness unless you used your EIDL loan for payroll purposes and then did not roll it into the PPP per the rules of the road. So if you receive an EIDL loan, you use it for payroll, you have to roll that in to your PPP loan under the PPP loan terms. There's a specific part of the PPP app that makes it certify. We use PPP loan for 4 months. It's mainly considered. You can use leftover funding after the 8-week period for all the applicable things that are put forward for the PPP. It just won't be forgiven. So after the 8-week period of forgiveness in which you want to determine forgiveness levels, if you still have money left over that you're not going to get forgiven, you can use it for rent, utilities, etc. And it'll be a 1% 2-year term. Now that's 6 months deferred payments, but interest still accrues on those 6 months, just to remind everybody. If I pay CAM charges, I don't know what CAM charges are within corporates, utilities. Can I use the whole amount as part of the big? Does anybody know what CAM charges are?
Common area maintenance charges from from a landlord. We don't have any guidance on that yet, as far as I know. My guess is
in the guidance today, it appears that only utilities in which you've written off previous years can be included under the PPP loan forgiveness. So I don't know if that answers this question, but anything that you've included on your previous tax return is something that you can deduct for your business. For utilities is what they will consider okay. You can't just add a new utility, for instance, unless you added it for business purposes earlier this year and you can prove that you were going to do it anyway.
You'll probably need to see a breakout of utilities under that CAM charge to be forgiven.
If we end up getting PPP loan early and office is still closed, can't we just pay ourselves the PPP loan as salary? And not if you have employees. So the whole point of this is, sure, you could just pay yourself, but if you don't have 75% of your employees back or 75% of your payroll, you're not going to receive full loan forgiveness. You'd get a little bit, but not a whole lot.
And plus, aren't you capped at that 8,333?
Yes, you're capped at, and they did weird math in this guidance, by the way, guys. It's like 15,735 is the cap amount that you can pay yourself. We were, I'm terrible at basic math. I leave it to you guys for that. But yes, you're capped at 100,000. Question for me: ADA needs to lobby to have N95 available. We are doing that right now, just to answer your question. We are definitely, in the next COVID package, that's the number one thing that we're asking for is PPE protection, tax breaks for having to retrofit your offices, and testing kits to be mandated for dental offices. So we're already doing that. If we pay our employees with this money, do we need to alert unemployment that they are back on payroll? I'm pretty sure that once they start receiving paychecks, it's automatic that unemployment is, I don't know. Does anyone know how that works? Does the employer have to? Does it vary by state? It must vary by state.
I along with Art's opinion, I leave that to labor law attorneys and check with your state. I think that's probably the best route to take.
Specifics on labor laws, hourly employees, well, that's again another labor law person. Any new information on the Main Street Lending Program? Okay, so the Main Street Lending Program is a new program that was announced last week, and this is intended for businesses between 500 and 10,000 employees. They're going to take 2 to 3 weeks to roll this out, but it's meant for medium-sized businesses that felt left out of corporate tax breaks, but also are not considered quote-unquote small businesses. So we will be seeing more information rolling out on this in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if I can answer such an in-depth, personal, seemingly specific question. If our 8 weeks for spending the PPP runs out in mid-June, do I still have until June 30 to get all employees up to the full-time status to achieve maximum forgiveness, or I need to have them back by the end of the 8 weeks? This is a great question. You need to have them back by the end of the 8-week period of your loan forgiveness. The June 30th date is the date in which people are able to apply for a PPP loan. So the money's going to run out before June 30th. If you're applying on June 15, the likelihood, even with an infusion of cash, of you getting a PPP loan is pretty minimal. So no, you don't have until June 30th. You have the end of your 8-week period from when you receive the funds from the loans to hire back 75%, that 75% level. Well, qualification, idle loan forgiveness is capped at $10,000 and it's $1,000 per employee. There's not a whole lot of qualifications. It's much less stringent application process, but again, that money's probably already exhausted. So if you haven't applied for an idle advance, then you aren't going to probably receive it. For loan forgiveness, there's no idle loan forgiveness unless you roll it into your PPP loan because you paid for it. The roll-in is the only way that you would be able to receive idle loan forgiveness.
Just remember that's capped at per employee. So if you have 5 employees, you only get the $5,000 advance. So
right, that's exactly.
Up to $10,000 max.
Mm-hmm. I know we only have 3 minutes left, so let me see if there's some dentists have received the grants. They just started to receive them yesterday. Our retirement employee contributions during the 8-week period qualified for, yes, they do qualify, retirement and health benefits for employees. Sorry, it keeps hopping up and down. You can only use these funds towards what was put forward in the CARES Act. So anything that is not specifically laid out for the PPP loan purpose would be considered fraud if you used it. Like if you used to pay for your yacht or something, yes, that would be not allowable under CARES, and you would be considered fraudulent. I think we only have 2 minutes left, so as not to give anyone a heart attack that has to go to their next webinar. I'm sorry Art dropped off. I'm sure we'll be doing this again next week, and hopefully he'll stay for the whole thing. I'm sure we'll be getting additional guidance from Treasury before we talk to you guys again. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm not going to speak for Scott or Dan, but feel free to reach out to me directly if you have questions legislatively or otherwise. And we look forward to talking to you guys next week and look out for additional updates. Scott, Dan, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, give me a shout if you have any questions. Same.
Okay.
Yep.
Hang in there, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And we will get the handout and the link to this recording sent out by tomorrow morning. So thank you to everyone and have a great day. Bye, guys.